Welcome, everyone. I am Adeshawa Josh, and this is Africa Matters. This week, we discuss what the takeover of Twitter by Elon Musk could mean for millions of users in Africa. In South Africa, victims of floods in KwaZulu-Natal province are waiting for millions of dollars of government aid. And there are growing concerns that it could end up in the wrong hands. And in Ghana, we talk to local firms trying to fight malaria through early testing and treatment, with the ambitious goal of ending the disease in Africa by 2030. In Africa, Twitter has fewer users compared to other social media platforms like Facebook. There are nearly 50 million users in the continent. South African-born billionaire and the world's richest man, Elon Musk, has now bought it for $44 billion. Musk has promised to make a series of reforms like defeating bots that spam user timelines and authenticate all humans. He says his main goal is to advance free speech in a platform that should be a digital town square where matters vital to the future of humanity are debated. But right groups are concerned that Musk's Twitter takeover could exacerbate the challenges it already faces and lead to a rise in disinformation, bullying, and hate speech. Africa Matters spoke to some of the users of the platform about their experiences on Twitter and the changes they'd like to see.
I think Twitter is a great platform. I think it allows people to express themselves, which is part of the information age we live in. In terms of Elon Musk taking it over, I think it's good, But in terms of what he can do to change it, I think he's limited because it's not an operating system like, Android or Apple.
I think having verified profiles, I think there are a lot of people hiding behind fake profiles, that cause a lot of issues.
I think I would change all the spam bots on there, like that advertise their fake websites with the ads and stuff like that.
First of all, I'd just like him to pull off the negative comments, the criticism part on Twitter, to make it a safer place.
See him adding the edit button into Twitter, because that's one of the features people have been longing to see. That's just a key feature I'm seeing him adding up onto Twitter.
For tens of millions of people in Africa, Twitter is more than just an app. It's also an essential tool for free speech. Over the past decade, the social media platform has become a powerful rallying tool for street protests and a virtual public square where authoritarian governments are held accountable. Let's take a look at some African countries where Twitter has played a critical role in driving social change. We start in Tunisia, where a Twitter-driven campaign against bad governance in 2011 forced President Zine Al Abidine Ben Ali to step down after 23 years in power. The uprising inspired the Egyptian revolution same year and led to the toppling of longtime President Hosni Mubarak. It began after activists mobilized hundreds of thousands of protesters with the hashtag January 25th on Twitter. In 2014, Nigerians used the hashtag Bring Back Our Girls to demand the immediate rescue of more than 200 girls kidnapped by Boko Haram militants. The hashtag eventually led to a global campaign in support of girls' education. In 2020, they used the hashtag EndSARS to demand an end to police brutality, an issue that also resonated with many globally. In 2015, South Africans used the hashtag Fees Must Fall to rally support for street protests against the proposed hike in fees for university students. The protest spread to 10 institutions across the country as top universities were forced to shut down. And then in 2019, Sudanese people used the hashtag Sudan Uprising to protest against the rising cost of bread in an event that led to the ousting of President Omar Bashir. And then last year in Ghana, the hashtag Fix the Country turned into a full-fledged street protest calling for better living conditions for young Ghanaians. All right, let's hear more from Africa Affairs analyst Joseph Ochiano. He joins me from Kampala, Uganda. Thank you so much for making out time to speak to Africa Matters. What are the implications, possible implications, of Elon Musk's concept of free speech on Africa's democracy?
I think generally, when we are discussing the question of free speech in Africa, we need to know that it's really one about limitations of the Africa's own infrastructure to deliver free speech, even if it were free. That is One, how many people in Africa have got access to internet? How many people in Africa have got access to Twitter or Facebook and social media as it were today? How many people have phones? I think many more slightly have much more phones, but how many have access to televisions or radio? So that's on the one hand. But on the other is limitations provided by laws, which normally tend to be laws which are rather harsh and dictatorial by governments and regime. And then thirdly, political restrictions, which basically are by governments who sometimes use the constitution to restrict people. Then, of course, then you come into the restrictions by big corporations, the Twitters of this world, and many others, the cost of internet, limitations to the access to many of these facilities relative to the rest of the world. So by and large, generally, it would be about that. But I think, yeah.
So basically, we have bigger fish to fry than Elon Musk taking over, since we still have limitations on infrastructure and accessibility to the internet. Right. But Twitter and other social media platforms have become important tools for social justice, despite all these limitations, in many African countries, and as such, a potent threat to authoritarian regimes. Will this change under Elon Musk?
Yes, your line is cutting off a bit, but if I get you quite right, the alternative social media that seems to be doing very well are actually WhatsApp. WhatsApp groups seem to be gaining traction with the people who are able to debate and consult, and it's perhaps rather difficult for them to be restricted. Facebook, with the recent restrictions, a country like Uganda, Facebook is restricted, but thanks to the innovations of people using VPN, people are able to, by and large, use this. But that said, I think because of the proliferation of technology in the last 10 to 15 years, where you find there are many radio, televisions, and other networks available, people still, by and large, are able to use these systems. Now, in countries where there are restrictions, unfortunately, fake news takes the center stage for many of these other spaces. But regardless, I think the young people are also being and becoming rather innovative. The other thing, though, is that, again, thanks to technology, people are able to watch this program on their televisions. People are able to transfer and share videos and networks and clips of programs like this through particularly, as I said, WhatsApp, with Facebook in countries where Facebook is actually not restricted. But I mean, beyond that, I think it's getting increasingly difficult for regimes or governments to hold those restrictions, except, as I say, unfortunately, it still is very much of an elitist game. The vast majority of Africans live in rural places, and many of them really do not have access to social media, especially because of the cost of data.
It's indeed a serious balancing act. Now, we've seen some government officials react faster when they are called out on social media. But users of such platforms are likely to be younger or in urban centers, as you rightly noted earlier in one of your answers. Is there a more effective way of holding governments into account daily on the continent?
I'm not sure. I think except countries like South Africa, you think about countries like possibly Tunisia. I am not quite sure about how many others have got stringent laws and regulations that are able to strike these balances. As I said, many of these tend to be very much targeted and directed at self-interest rather than the interest of the ordinary citizens. And in this case, as I said, as part, if you like, as a way to work with big corporations. Nigerian government very quickly came very hard and very big on Twitter. So did the Ugandan authorities on Facebook when they felt that their platforms were being used by the opponents with very modestly against the interests of the state rather than the interests of the citizenry. But when it comes really to the broader issues that should really by and large concern these governments, as I said, things to do with homophobic abuse or many people in power and positions of power using these as extra networks on top of the state media for their campaigns, they look the other way. So I think by and large the citizenry still remain alone. But so it's unfortunate if the new owners of people like the new owners of Twitter, if they came and they had some sense of social responsibility, they would possibly be the ones to, not perhaps impose, but to have discussions with most of the governments, and indeed campaign groups and the media like yourselves to try and help, if you like, either self-regulate or push as part of the broader campaign to give access to information while at the same time regulating social media in a manner in which is actually both responsible and serves the interests of the broader citizens of the day.
Excellent point, Joseph Ochenuh. Thank you so much for speaking to us on Africa Matters. We have more stories coming up for you here on Africa Matters, including more than 400 lives lost and 40,000 people affected in the worst floods to have hit South Africa. The devastated province of KwaZulu-Natal hopes to rebuild immediately after thousands of homes were destroyed.
I am Isaac Kanleji. I will show you how facilities like the one behind me are providing free malaria testing and treatment to Ghanaians in an effort to save lives.
We head to South Africa next, where the people in KwaZulu-Natal province say they will remember April the 11th and 12th for a very long time. That's when several months of rain fell in 48 hours, devastating communities already struggling through difficult times. But while the country's leaders have promised aid, those who need it worry that it may end up in the hands of corrupt politicians instead of theirs. Naledi Moleo reports from Durban.
The storm itself is over, but its scars can be felt across many parts of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa. Of the 40,000 people affected by floods in the province, more than 7,000 remain in shelters, waiting for a place to call home once again. The army has been deployed to help with aid and relief, and more than $64 million has been allocated by government to rebuild. But the province's premier believes the money needed is double the amount the government has put forward. For victims who survived the floods, they're rebuilding their homes with the little they can salvage, hoping aid will reach them soon. But a lack of trust in government has led many to fear that the money will not reach them.
We are waiting. We are waiting to see if any assistance comes. People from disaster management came and wrote our names down, but we don't know if any of them will come to our aid. The people from disaster management told us to start rebuilding on our own, and maybe they'll be back to see our receipts.
While some families wait for assistance, others mourn. This is the family of Sergeant Busisiwe Mjwaha, who drowned while trying to find missing bodies. She was conducting a search in the Msunduzi River in KwaZulu-Natal for 3 people that had drowned earlier in the week. In attendance of her funeral are government officials, one of which had to step aside from his position of health minister after allegations of corruption were leveled against him.
For the Mjwaha family, we are saddened by the death of this young woman. She was loved dearly and she was so humble.
The family of the police officer, however, still feels that they are owed answers as to how their sister died on the fateful day following the floods.
I'm not satisfied in my heart because up until today, I still don't know exactly what happened to my sister. All I know is I had to get up and drive to the scene where my sister died. Yet it makes no sense to me because she did receive training to learn to swim. I just want closure for myself.
Busisiwe Mjwaha dreamt of becoming a police officer all her life, and while she managed to fulfill that dream of becoming a hero in her community, she sadly lost her life while trying to bring much-needed closure to devastated families. Naledi Moleo, Africa Matters, Durban.
Malaria is still considered one of the deadliest diseases in sub-Saharan Africa. According to the World Health Organization, the region accounts for about 93% of all malaria deaths globally. In 2020 alone, more than 500,000 people around the world died from the disease. And often the lack of access to early testing and treatment means people report to the hospital very late. In Ghana, some local health firms are finding solutions to this problem with free testing and treatment. Isaac Kaleji in Accra has more.
Ebenezer Kofi Edulate is a doctor at this small private clinic in the Kaswa community in central Ghana. His facility often treats cases of malaria from local residents. Edulati is concerned that the disease is still prevalent here, as some report very late.
Some people get like the same thing through the neck, lock in the ear. They don't know it's malaria. But more people who comes late are basically about the costs. And then the way the system is, like the purchasing power of people have gone low. Because of that, they're running late. And when they're running late, before they come, they have done some other concoction or some treatment back home.
Many communities in Ghana still struggle with sanitation and a rundown sewage system, resulting in stagnant water, ideal conditions for mosquitoes. That puts millions at risk of contracting the disease.
Many Ghanaians report to the hospital long after they've contracted malaria and often lack access to early testing and treatment. But some local health firms are finding innovative solutions to this problem and saving lives in the process.
Isaac Kugbajo has brought his 3-year-old son Emmanuel to this pharmacy in Tema, 30 kilometers away from the capital Accra. He's here to get some drugs as he suspects he has malaria. But first, the facility is providing free rapid testing before treatment. The local firm called Pharma is behind the initiative. The company supplies drugs to health facilities, but also wants to empower pharmacies like this with innovative tools to provide simple healthcare services, including that of malaria.
In fact, it has been a tremendous help because as a pharmacy, we're also in a collaboration with Pharma, who provide us with nurses, community nurses, to go into the communities to educate, to announce, and to render such services, especially malaria treatment services, and also even to call them in, direct them in to the pharmacy where we do the check-in and also provide the medication services to them.
Malaria remains a major cause of illness and death in Ghana. In 2020, nearly 20% of Ghanaians are hospitalized with it. Health activists say more needs to be done to reduce malaria morbidity and mortality.
One cannot eradicate malaria, but we need to make sure that it's a holistic, and that is why civil society, we are calling for, and we are saying that advancing the fight, we have to ensure that all malaria interventions are community-centered. We have to make it community-centered, tailor it to meet the need of each and every community.
Parents like Kubajo are happy they can now easily access free testing and treatment for their kids, even at pharmacies like this. With more of such services across the country, kids like his should be free of malaria. Isaac Kaleji, Africa Matters, Accra, Ghana.
You're watching Africa Matters, and here's a roundup of other stories making news across the continent. The Nigerian government has passed a bill imposing the death penalty on crimes relating to abduction to curb rising kidnappings and banditry in the country. The Senate also set a minimum of 15 years jail term for family members who pay ransom. The committee chairman argues that the lengthy jail sentencing will discourage the spate of kidnapping for ransom across the country. Recently, Nigeria has been ravaged by a rise in kidnappings and killings in the northern region. The World Health Organization says it has launched a vaccination campaign after 2 people died of a new strain of Ebola in the northwestern town of Mbandaka in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. More than 230 people who came in contact with them have been identified and are being monitored. They will be among the people receiving the initial 200 doses of the Ebola vaccine that have been shipped to the area. Frontline and healthcare workers will also get jabs. The Central African Republic has adopted Bitcoin as official currency. Lawmakers passed a bill governing the use of cryptocurrency and described the move as visionary. The CAR is the first African country to accept Bitcoin as a means of payment and only the second in the world. The country currently uses the French-backed CFA franc as its currency. critics warn that it's premature since internet access is underdeveloped, while others say it will be easier to trade using smartphones and convert Bitcoin to other currencies. An opposition leader in Rwanda has criticized Britain's recent deal to send asylum seekers to the country. Frank Habineza, president of Democratic Green Party of Rwanda, says it's inhumane because asylum seekers don't have the right to choose where they end up, and it could strain state resources once the $150 million budget runs out. The UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson struck a deal with Kigali to send people who arrive in Britain as stowaways on trucks or in small boats to have their asylum processed in the East African nation. Millions of people in the Democratic Republic of the Congo have been living with frequent power cuts for years. But a nun has come up with an initiative to generate electricity, as Paulo Monticello reports.
Sister Alphonsine Ciza is not your usual nun. Her white veil is tucked under a safety hat, and she spends most of her day in this hydroelectric plant which she built. It's in Miti, a town in the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo.
The convent was looking for an electrician, a technician who could help. They saw in me the talent of electrical engineering, so they offered me an opportunity to go study electrical engineering. That's where it all started.
The World Bank says about 72 million Congolese don't have access to electricity, 3/4 of the population. Instead, they rely on candlelight and generators. That inspired Sister Ciza to start raising money in 2015 to build her hydropower plant. It now lights up a convent, church, a clinic, and 2 schools for free. Without it, residents in Miti would only have electricity for a few hours, 2 or 3 days a week.
Sometimes the electricity comes back at night. When the children are no longer at school, it was rare to have power during the day. We had to use fuel for the generator, but buying fuel was very expensive. It was no longer possible at some point, so we were forced to stop and only teach theory for the computer science course.
The World Bank says that if electrification continues at the same pace as the last decade, people here won't have electricity before 2030. Even though the government has tried to expand the power grid, critics say new, donor-funded projects focus too much on powering mines and exporting electricity to neighboring countries, leaving hospitals like this in the dark.
We use the current that comes from the sister's house. When we used the current of the national grid, there was load shedding, so there was untimely energy cuts. We could even go a whole night without electricity in the hospital. So you'll understand the importance of power at night in a hospital. It was difficult going all night without electricity, and it was like a resurrection when our neighbor gave us some of their current and gave us the energy we use.
Sister Ciza's efforts have spared some people from daily blackouts, but millions across the country remain in the dark. Paulo Monticello, Africa Matters.
This week, we explore Eldoret in Western Kenya, which has become known as a training ground and home for elite runners like Olympian and marathon world record holder Eliud Kipchoge. And that's our show this week. Please share your thoughts and suggestions about the stories you've seen on this episode or ideas on what you would like us to cover on Twitter using the hashtag #AfricaMatters. Feel free to reach out to me on my personal handle at @AdeshowaJosh. You can watch this episode and more on YouTube. Just search Africa Matters TRT World. Like, comment, and share. I'll see you next week.